discriminate against the old as they bring experience. I saw the oldest postman I've ever seen the other day, just near Twickenham Stadium, and those Isleworth gardens that you can work on, allotments. He must have been in his late 60s, early 70s. He must have been. I think the post office have changed their policy as well. Right, here we go. Listen, I will nail my colours to the mast, as they say, very, very early on. I come from a medical family, so I'm not sure about Martha's Rule, to be honest. I know a lot of you will disagree, and I'd like to hear from you. Martha's Rule is coming into force today. NHS leaders will announce.
It's 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 21st of February. Good morning, this is Today with Martha Carney.
The headlines this morning. 100 hospitals in England are to begin following Martha's Rule from April, giving seriously ill patients and family the right to an urgent second opinion. After 8, you will hear our interview with Martha's mother, Merope Mills, and why the new guidance matters.
If you're worried, if you think something's going wrong, you should scream the war down, because that's what I didn't do, and I regret it. I will regret it for the rest of my days. But the very existence of Martha's Rule says you don't need to scream the war down. All you need to do is call this number because you've got Martha's Rule.
The other headline this morning: a Trident missile that forms part of the UK's nuclear deterrent has failed in the test firing for the second time in a row. Also in today's programme, a pioneering European satellite is due to fall to Earth in the coming hours. We'll talk to science about what it uncovered and whether we should be worried about its uncontrolled plunge into the atmosphere. And there's Monty Python's Holy Grail returns to the cinemas. Horrible History's Greg Jenner tells us why the film is surprisingly accurate about medieval Britain.
Python is just the #1 film for many years. They loved how silly it was, they loved how creative it was. There are so many in-jokes in the movie that medieval historians particularly laugh at.
But first, the BBC News read by Owens.
The NHS in England will begin to introduce Martha's Rule from April, giving access to rapid critical care reviews if a patient's condition worsens in hospital. The scheme is named after 13-year-old Martha Mills, who died from sepsis when doctors failed to respond to her parents' concerns. They welcomed the change, telling this programme it will mean that their daughter didn't die in vain. Our health correspondent Sophie Hutchinson reports.
Martha Mills died of sepsis in 2021 at King's College Hospital in London, while her parents' concerns about her deterioration were ignored by staff. This NHS initiative, Martha's Rule, is an escalation process which will allow patients, families and NHS staff to call for a rapid review from an independent critical care team 24 hours a day if they want an urgent second opinion. NHS England says at least 100 hospitals can now apply for funding for awareness schemes, which may include printing posters and information leaflets. But questions remain about whether the initiative will be standardised across hospitals.
A test firing of a Trident missile from a Royal Navy submarine has failed for the second time in a row. The Ministry of Defence has insisted that the system used to deliver Britain's nuclear warheads remains safe, secure and effective. Our Defence correspondent Jonathan Beale has more details.
Both the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps and the head of the Navy were on board HMS Vanguard when she fired the unarmed test missile off the east coast of America. The missile dropped into the ocean near to where it was launched. The previous UK Trident test in 2016 also ended in failure when the missile veered off course. In a statement, the Ministry of Defence admitted an anomaly had occurred in the most recent launch, but it also claimed Trident remained the most reliable weapon system, having completed more than 190 successful tests.
A report by the former head of the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse has warned that the Church of England's safeguarding measures fall below the standards expected of secular organisations. Professor Alexis Jay says new bodies independent of the Church should be created to take over the protection of children.
Professor Jay has delivered bold and clear recommendations on how to make safeguarding independent through the creation of 2 new charities funded by the Church of England. The first would conduct investigations and provide support to abuse victims and survivors, with complainants being referred to the new charity as quickly as possible. The second charity would independently scrutinise the operations of the first. Professor Jay's report recognises the good work being done by individuals in churches, but talks of systemic problems and huge inconsistencies across the Church of England's 42 dioceses.
The government is implementing one of the key recommendations of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse by making it a legal requirement for many people who work with children in England and Wales to report evidence of abuse. Those who fail to comply with the mandatory reporting duty could be barred from working with young people, while covering up abuse could result in a prison sentence. MPs will vote today on a call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, tabled by the SNP. The government wants an immediate humanitarian pause. For the first time since the Hamas attack on Israel in October, Labour is calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, as our political correspondent Ian Watson reports.
Sir Keir Starmer has been under pressure to call for a ceasefire from a significant section of his party. Last November, more than 50 of his MPs rebelled, voting for the SNP's call for an immediate ceasefire then, and the party leadership have told them to abstain. Labour has put forward an amendment to the SNP motion today, and its own use of the word ceasefire is set to avoid a repeat rebellion, but the government has now decided to put forward its own proposed change to the SNP motion. This makes it less likely that the Speaker will select the Labour amendment for debate. So, some of Sir Keir's MPs who want an immediate ceasefire, they feel they must once again back the SNP.
The BBC investigation has found that the poor state of NHS hospital buildings was the cause of hundreds of potentially harmful incidents in England during the last financial year. They included an operating theatre overheating because of broken air conditioning and the partial collapse of ceilings. The government said significant sums had been invested to modernise NHS buildings, including £4.2 billion this financial year. Junior doctors in Wales will begin a 72-hour strike over pay at 7 o'clock this morning. It's the second round of industrial action after a similar walkout last month. And the European satellite that was among the first to be fitted with technologies that are now used routinely to monitor climate is due to fall to Earth in the coming hours. Most of the 2-ton ERS-2 model is expected to burn up in the atmosphere before reaching the surface.
Thanks very much indeed. It's 6 minutes past 6. Let's hear about the weather from Simon King. Morning, Simon.
Good morning, Martha. Yeah, it's a very wet start today, actually. We've got some heavy rain spreading its way eastward across many parts. So for southwest and southeast England, that rain is going to continue for much of this morning. It may just ease off slightly into the afternoon, but staying quite light and patchy, the rain. There may be some brighter skies in southwest England later. Temperatures about 9 to 13 degrees. For the Midlands, eastern and northeast England, we're not seeing the rain quite yet, but it will soon move in and turn really quite heavy, making it a very soppy morning. Rain patches on during the afternoon, but staying largely cloudy, temperatures 9 to 13. For Wales, northwest England and all of Scotland, it's a very wet start to Wednesday. Heavy rain in places, the commute's really quite tricky. Some strong winds as well with some gales in the far north. Rain will gradually ease off, but there'll be some sunny spells developing from mid-afternoon. Exception to that will be the Northern Isles, where rain hangs on, temperatures 10 to 14. And then for Northern Ireland, heavy rain will clear eastward over the next few hours, and then from lunchtime there'll be some sunny spells and temperatures of 10 to 12 Celsius. Simon, thank you. 7 minutes past 6. Shall we look at the papers? Several of them reporting that Prince of Wales's plea for a pause in the fighting in Gaza was done in cooperation and alignment with the Foreign Office. The quotes government sources as saying his comments will help boost Britain's diplomatic voice. The Daily Mail's columnist Richard Kay claims that Prince William is well-intentioned but warns that he could be heading for uncharted waters. The Daily Telegraph says Israeli officials report off guard by his comments, which they consider to be naive.
The Sun leads on the Trident missile that misfired and crashed into the ocean off Florida, yards away from the British nuclear submarine that launched it. The paper quotes the source as saying it just went plop and sank. It says a frantic probe then began to find out what went wrong. The Ministry of Defence tells the paper an anomaly occurred, but said that the nuclear deterrent remained effective.
The Guardian reports that Sir Keir Starmer is facing the threat of revolt over Gaza, despite changing his stance and calling for an immediate ceasefire. The paper says Labour is trying to ward off another party split in today's Commons vote. One Labour source telling the Guardian an amendment
So the more blunt SNP motion on Gaza should be enough to avoid another major rebellion. But the paper says Labour officials believe that a major revolt could be on the cards if the Commons Speaker chooses a government amendment ahead of the Labour one.
The Financial Times says Henry Badenoch has been plunged into a fresh political storm, this time over trade talks with Canada. The paper says Ottawa has insisted that the discussions in which the Business Secretary says she's engaged do not exist. The chair of the Business and Trade Committee, the Labour MP Liam Byrne, is quoted as saying that Ms Badenoch must now explain why the Canadians' account is so utterly at variance with what she told the Commons. The Department for Business and Trade have not immediately commented.
The Gulag expert tells the Times it fears that Alexei Navalny was killed by a punch to the heart after being exposed to freezing conditions for hours, a technique once taught to KGB operatives. Vladimir Oshekin is quoted as saying that bruising apparently found on the Russian opposition leader's body was consistent with the one-punch technique. The Daily Mirror's front page leads on a warning for other critics of President Putin. The activist Bill Browder telling the Mirror that the Russian president will now embark on a killing spree with 12 targets at risk of Britain.
And the Times says Elon Musk has disclosed that the first person to have been fitted with a brain implant by his company Neuralink is doing well and able to move a computer mouse around the screen by thinking. The paper says the billionaire's ultimate aim is to create a mass-market device that would connect users' minds with computers to achieve what it calls symbiosis with artificial intelligence.
The Times 10:06.
The United States last night vetoed a UN Security Council resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Today, here in the UK, our Parliament will be voting on such a measure. David Willis is our Washington correspondent. I spoke to him earlier and asked him how the veto had gone down with the international community.
The resolution was tabled, of course, by Algeria. It was blocked by the United States, the third time the US has vetoed such a move, to the frustration of many UN diplomats who've accused the United States of prioritizing its own diplomatic efforts in the Middle East at the expense of the wider efforts of the United Nations as a whole. Algeria's ambassador to the UN said that the US action implied an endorsement of the violence against the Palestinian people. The Palestinian ambassador called the move deplorable, and China expressed its strong disappointment and dissatisfaction with the United States over its veto. China's permanent representative to the UN, Zhang Jieun, was quoted as saying that it equaled a license to kill and was tantamount to giving a green light to continued slaughter, as he put it, in Gaza.
That veto showing strong support for the Israeli government, but there are signs, aren't there, that the mood is changing within the White House and towards the Israeli government.
The Biden administration has been generally averse up to now to the word ceasefire in any UN action on the war. It strenuously supported the right of its traditionally close ally Israel to defend itself, yet as the conflict has dragged on, the US has become increasingly frustrated with Benjamin Netanyahu over the growing death toll in Gaza, which has drawn criticism of President Biden here at home in what is, of course, an election year. I think Israel will be concerned about another feature of that draft US resolution, which opposes Israel's planned ground offensive into the city of Rafah, where more than 1 million Palestinians have taken refuge. The resolution says that such a move would have serious implications, as it puts it, for regional peace and security.
David Willis, many thanks.
30 minutes past 6. A satellite will fall to Earth today. It's job done. Let's talk to Jonathan Amos, our science correspondent. Whose satellite is it, Jonathan, and why is it coming back?
Well, it's a very important satellite in the sense that it really got Earth observation going in Europe. So this is the Earth Remote Sensing Satellite 2. It was one of a pair of satellites put up in the 90s that really pioneered the techniques and applications that have become routine now to study the planet, to look at the climate. It's about 2 tons in size. If you see a streak of light just in the sky this afternoon around 4 o'clock, that might be it. but we'll see. Most of the Earth's surface is covered by water, but the chances are we'll see nothing, and if anything does survive, it'll plop into the ocean.
And it actually stopped work some time ago, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, they put it up in '95. It worked for over a decade, but then they tried to put it down a little bit just before it went kaput. It did go kaput eventually. So it's coming in uncontrolled. They've got no means of controlling exactly where it comes down. That's something of a concern now. Everybody's talking about the sustainability of space. You know, Elon Musk, in just the last few years, has put up over 5,000 satellites. It's getting quite crowded up there. And everybody's talking about, you know, the best way to use space, bit of traffic management.
Jonathan, thank you. More on this in Mouse.
And the time now is 14 minutes past 6. And we can hear about this morning's business news because Europe's biggest lender, HSBC, has announced a huge rise in profits in the past couple of hours. Will Bain's got more on that. Hi, Will.
Hi, Martha. Morning, and morning, Justin, as well. Yeah, the bank was announcing its full year results a little earlier on this morning and reported pre-tax profits were up 78% on the year. Alicia Garcia Herrero, chief economist for Asia Pacific at Natixis, is with us. Alicia, morning.
Good morning.
Huge rise in profits, and what was driving it?
Well, there is a rise in profits, but there is the reality is that there's also problems. Yeah, the HSBC has had to announce $3 billion in basically an impairment in China. Another 2, I think, because of its closure of its French business. So, you know, if you think about it, these are good results because interest rates are very high. And basically, European banks are doing well thanks to this. And HSBC is one of them. But I think the key question mark is, what about next year? What about if the Chinese economy and the Hong Kong economy, for that matter, do not recover? That's a big question mark for HSBC.
Right, pre-tax profit for the year like $30 billion and just over £23.5 billion ish. Those challenges ahead then, Alicia, is that why the chief executive Noel Quinn already seems to be playing down those expectations for next year? And just explain why the bank in particular will be so worried about what's happening in the Chinese economy at the moment.
First, I mean, laying down expectations come from 2 sources. First, we know rates will come down. US and the Eurozone, second half of the year, big question mark on the UK. But the point is, that won't be as good. But on China, the reason why this is so important is that HSBC is the bank in the world that is most exposed. So, you know, in the best times, only Hong Kong was doing 1/3 of its profits. And of course, this has changed because China is growing less, because China is not bringing so much to the bank. Same for Hong Kong. But the reality is that that was the direction that was taken, 5 years ago, and it now seems it's not working. So I think, rightly so, there needs to be a warning that this might be a problem next year, a much bigger problem.
And what it's exposed as well to the property sector and the issues that we've talked about quite a bit on the programme that are going on in the Chinese property sector in particular.
Yes, that's right. I mean, the issue here is that these impairments is basically provisioning, as we say, is just covering potential losses. And of course, there's going to be these losses. Yeah, I mean, we had from Evergrande to Country Garden, huge developers basically either defaulting all the way to liquidation. In the case of Evergrande is a big issue because this is a Hong Kong liquidation. So, you know, if you're a big bank in Hong Kong, you're going to be exposed. So yeah, I mean, the real estate sector is one of the reasons. There's other reasons, but it's a big one for HSBC.
Alicia, thanks so much for your time. That's Alicia Garcia Herrero, chief economist for Asia Pacific at Natixis there. We're listening to that as our markets list this morning. Anna McDonald, senior equity analyst at Sustainary Global. Anna, morning.
Good morning.
Give us a thought on HSBC. I mean, it's made this big pivot to Asia, and it sounds like from what Alicia was saying there, that some of its challenges in the year ahead are going to be in Asia too.
Yes, China has not recovered from COVID to the associated shutdowns as quickly as anyone really expected. And 5% GDP growth might sound strong, but remember it used to be double digit in the past, and that's what they delivered in 2023. And the CEO, Noel Quinn, has said they're cautiously optimistic about that continuing this year. Yes, it's not nearly as fast growing as it was. They do have exposure though to other really fast growing economies such as India and Vietnam, but as China and Hong Kong are so important for them, this is probably going to hold them back. And as Alicia says, they're having to provision for further impairments, probably at the upper end of their historical range.
Let's shift to economics, Alicia, and interesting thoughts from the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, yesterday. He was chatting to MPs on the Treasury's Select Committee, saying the UK recession may already be over and there are now distinct signs of an upturn. Here's a little bit more of what the Governor had to say.
I would emphasise just on this point about the recession. I mean, I think we have a very precise description, the definition of recession in this country is two successive quarters of negative GDP growth. The two successive quarters, i.e. Q3 and Q4 last year, I think cumulatively add up to minus 0.5% on GDP. If you look at recessions going back to the 1970s, this is the weakest by a long way, because the range, I think, for the numbers for those two quarter numbers for the previous recessions was something like 2.5% to 22% in terms of lost negative GDP. So minus 0.5 is a very weak recession.
Anna, what did you make of what the Governor had to say, and what did the market make of what he had to say?
The market responded by pricing in further, cementing their view that there will be interest rate cuts this year. They are now saying the chance of 3 cuts this year is at 75%. This is given that he said he was also, to quote, comfortable with a profile that has cuts in it, i.e. he's comfortable with what the market is pricing in.
And also this interesting phrase, we don't need obviously inflation to come back to target before we cut interest rate.
Yes, he said he wanted to be very clear on that, and that's because I think they face an awful lot of criticism for being late to respond to inflation going up. We know that there is a lag after putting in interest rate cuts before that really hits us all, before your mortgages, for example, reprice, and before corporates have to pay more interest rates. So what he's saying is that this lag, they're aware of it, and they will cut rates in advance if they see that profile of inflation coming down sharply.
More company results out this morning, Anna, as well. The Anglo-Australian mining firm Rio Tinto, with those in the past hour, tells us kind of a lot of interesting things that are going on in the global economy.
Yes, Rio Tinto is a huge mining company for which about over half its revenues come from iron ore, which is used for steel and has been growing enormously with the China boom, which now having gone into reverse has been quite tricky for it. So they did report overall an 11% drop in underlying earnings, but they're still going to be a big dividend payer, paying out $7 billion in dividends this year.
And interesting, just a line in their results as well, that they seem to think that there's some of their supply chain issues look like they were sort of flattening themselves out, I guess, so I guess not concerned about anything that they were shipping through the Red Sea, for example.
Yeah, I think that's not such a major issue for them.
Absolutely. Anna, thanks so much for your time as always. That's Anna McDonald there from Sustinieri Global. Well, the Body Shop here on the UK High Street set to shut nearly half of its 198 stores, we've heard, in the past 12 hours or so. Reduce the size of its head office as well, and could lead, of course, to hundreds of job losses. Peter Williams is a former CEO of Selfridges and has over 30 years of experience in the retail sector. Peter, morning.
Good morning.
Your reaction, first of all, then, to these decisions by the Body Shop?
I think it's a very sad moment. I mean, the Body Shop is one of those wonderful retailers where people feel very warm towards it. I think that if it's obviously in trouble, and for many people, they'll be very worried about its potential demise, because it had a very unique position from when it was founded by Anita Roddick way back in 1976.
What's gone wrong then?
I think they've lost the plot a bit, really. I mean, it's had several ownerships. I mean, obviously it started out live being owned by the Roddick family, and they then IPO'd it. It was then bought at one stage by L'Oreal, and more recently then by Natura, a South American company. And if you go back, you know, sort of in time, way back to the 70s and 80s when it sort of started out, you know, it was one of the first of these retailers to sort of sell products and talk about ethically sourced products, things that were cruelty-free, which was a big topic way back in the 80s in the cosmetics industry, and using natural ingredients. So the product, you know, had this kind of uniqueness to it. And then the other pioneering spirit really about the business was that, you know, Anita led a number of sort of campaigns really relating to sort of social responsibility and environmental issues, which, you know, in those days was, you know, unusual. I mean, it's more common today, but she was really a fantastic pioneer of those things.
So what do you think in practical terms, Peter? Because people have said this, haven't they, in the past couple of days, that it kind of got caught standing still a little bit. What do they mean by that? What didn't the Body Shop do that it should have done?
I think it's in danger, you know, of losing its sort of provenance, if you like, or it may well have lost its provenance from those early days. So it's not really distinguishing itself anymore, or enough, from the competitive set. You know, you need a very strong, you know, the cosmetics industry is fiercely competitive. There are, you know, a whole host of, you know, brands around the place, and some really mega companies, you know, running them. And as I said, the whole ethos of Body Shop when it started out just appears to have got lost over time, which I think is a real tragedy.
So we know half the store's going, and this cut in terms of staffing numbers in head office. What do you think the potential is for those remaining stores, and in terms of if someone is interested in taking on those sections of the business, what would you be advising them to do with those stores?
Well, I think that, you know, having store presence is important. I mean, as ever, you know, you've got to make sure they're in the right locations and all the rest, and that is something that's, you know, affecting all retailers very much at the moment with, you know, the advent of e-commerce and all the rest of it. A lot of trade has moved from the offline stores to the, you know, online e-commerce, and that is an area where I would say Body Shop can actually articulate its purpose and make a difference, because online you can describe things in far more detail than you can in stores. So I would say that there is an opportunity with the online business, but I think also, you know, having a physical presence is so fantastic. If you go back to those earlier days, you know, walking into a Body Shop store, you know, was an experience. Yeah. And I don't think that is so much today.
Yeah, Peter, thanks so much for your time. Peter Williams, former CEO of Selfridges, 30 years experience in the retail sector. And that's just about it for the business news as well. Rob Bonnet standing by with the sport. Morning, Rob.
Good morning, Will. Well, it came in the last quarter of the game. It took some getting, but Erling Haaland's goal for Manchester City was enough to beat Brentford 1-0 in the Etihad Stadium last night. Alistair Bruce Ball reports.
Brentford were the one Premier League team that Erling Haaland hadn't scored against, but he took care of that, much to the relief for the Manchester City fans who thought the crucial goal might not come against a resolute Brentford team, and it's moved City just a point behind Liverpool at the top of the table. They were helped by Christopher Ayer's slip as Haaland raced onto Julian Alvarez's through ball in the 71st minute, and he provided a sure-footed finish in the pressure moment. City weren't at their fluent best throughout. Their best spell came at the end of the first half when Ben Mee's incredible goal line clearance kept Oscar Bobb's shot out. Phil Foden shone again, Kevin De Bruyne got a rest, Haaland had another goal ruled out for offside, but his 17th Premier League goal of the season got the job done and shows Pep Guardiola's men are still the team to beat in this thrilling title race.
In the Champions League, meanwhile, Arsenal are at Porto this evening to follow a 1-0 win last night for Inter Milan against Atletico Madrid. PSV Eindhoven drew 1-1 with Borussia Dortmund. And Paris Saint-Germain striker Kylian Mbappe is joining Real Madrid, a dream destination, of course, for top footballers, but it also has something, I think, to do with the money. He's set to sign a 5-year deal with Real, earning the equivalent of almost £13 million a season, plus a £128 million signing bonus. First win of the 2024 season for Andy Murray. He's beaten world number 75 Alexandre Müller in the Qatar Open, ending a 6-match losing streak with a 6-1, 7-6 victory.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the last few months have been, you know, really tough on the court for me. Clearly not won many matches and lost a lot of close ones as well, and it was getting tight at the end there, so obviously delighted to get through. Yeah, it was great.
News from India that England captain Ben Stokes has been bowling in the nets for the first time since having knee surgery in November. He previously ruled out bowling on this tour, but after that heavy defeat in the third test, maybe he's changed his mind. And meanwhile, India batter Virat Kohli has announced the birth of his second child. Already absent in this series, he'll miss the rest of it. And proposed changes to athletics long jump competition, with the measurement taken from where the competitor leaves the runway, not the takeoff board, have not been universally welcomed. Former world silver medalist Shara Proctor said, "Here they go, messing with the long jump again. What's the point of practicing consistency on the runway?" Okay, here are the tits. Doncaster 235, number 2 Johnson's Blue, Ludlow 330, number 7 Rock in a Storm.
Well, thanks. Let's find out now who's in John Ronson's sights.
Season 2 of Things Fell Apart concludes with Mickey Willis, a man who fueled the fires of all the culture wars I covered this time around.
There will be a point when we will dine on insects.
He believes in a communist plot to enslave us. But why did the former actor and model burned by Hollywood come to be a cultural leader? And what are the consequences of his actions?
Tony has security 24/7. Yeah, and they go with us everywhere we go.
All episodes of Things Fell Apart with me, John Ronson, are available now on BBC Sounds. Season 2 concludes on Radio 4 next Tuesday morning at 9.
Time now is exactly 6:30. You're listening to Today on Radio 4. Martha Carney, Justin Webb and Alan Smith with the news.
NHS hospitals in England are to begin introducing Martha's Rule from April. The scheme is named after 13-year-old Martha Mills, who died from sepsis when doctors failed to respond to her parents' concerns. Martha's Rule will give seriously ill patients and their families the right to an urgent second opinion. A test firing of a Trident missile from a Royal Navy submarine has failed for the second time in a row. The latest test was carried out from HMS Vanguard off the east coast of the United States. The Ministry of Defence has insisted that the system used to deliver Britain's nuclear warheads remains safe, secure and effective. A report into safeguarding in the Church of England has found standards fall below what's expected in secular organisations. The author, the former head of the Child Sex Abuse Inquiry, Professor Alexis Jay, calls for 2 independent charities to be set up to take over protection of children and vulnerable adults. MPs will vote later on the SNP's call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Labour has put forward an amendment calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire to try to avoid a repeat of a rebellion by its MPs last November. But that may not be put to the vote because the government has tabled its own changes calling for an immediate humanitarian pause. A BBC investigation has found that the poor state of NHS hospital buildings was the cause of hundreds of potentially harmful incidents in England during the last financial year. They included an operating theatre overheating because of broken air conditioning and the partial collapse of ceilings. The government